Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to control a room without lifting their voice? They don't argue. They don't explain. They don't plead for understanding. They simply pull back. And the moment they do, everything changes. The atmosphere changes. People become uneasy. Questions start forming. Suddenly, others feel the absence and feel it deeply. Now pause for a moment and imagine this. What if you did the same? What if you stopped responding instantly to every message, every demand, every emotional pull? What if instead of reacting on impulse, you chose silence? Instead of engagement, you chose distance? What do you think would happen? That question is where real power begins. Because when you are no longer constantly available, emotionally, physically, psychologically, the environment around you destabilizes. Not because you did something wrong, but because people were accustomed to accessing you freely. They were used to your reactions, your explanations, your predictability. And predictability is control. The moment you withdraw, the dynamic breaks. Those who believed they understood you suddenly realize they never did. Before we go deeper, if this perspective already resonates with you, if you sense there's truth here that you felt but never articulated, consider staying with this channel. The ideas we explore here aren't designed to comfort you. They're designed to wake you up. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Now reflect on this carefully. When you become less accessible, who becomes agitated? Who grows impatient? Who tries to provoke a reaction from you just to feel reassured that they still have influence? That response tells you far more about them than it does about you. More importantly, it exposes how much control they previously had, often without you even realizing it. You keep giving yourself away to maintain harmony. You say yes to avoid conflict. You respond immediately to avoid being misunderstood. You overextend to keep people close who were never truly aligned with you. And with every forced agreement, every rushed reply, every emotional reaction you didn't even want to give, you leak energy. By the end of the day, what remains is a strange exhaustion, a quiet frustration, an emptiness that doesn't have a clear cause. Here's the truth most people never hear. You are drained because you are too available to those who haven't earned even a moment of your silence. This isn't about rejecting the world. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and internally sovereign. And that process often begins with a realization most people resist. Silence can carry more force than endless explanations. Withdrawal, when done consciously, not from fear, not from avoidance, is an act of authority. So let me ask you directly, how much longer will you allow the emotional states of others to dictate your behavior? How long will you keep reacting like a marionette every time someone touches an old wound? At some point, the strings must be cut, because the moment you stop being endlessly available, something profound happens. You've been conditioned since childhood to respond quickly, to be agreeable, to show up even when it costs you, to say yes when your body is screaming no. You were taught, subtly, repeatedly, that your worth is measured by how accessible you are to others. But here is a truth rarely stated this clearly. Excessive availability is not kindness. It is confinement. And as long as you believe you must always be reachable, always responsive, always emotionally open, you will be drained, manipulated, and discarded the moment you are no longer useful. Why? Because what is always available becomes predictable. And what is predictable becomes a tool. People begin to treat you like an emotional emergency switch. They press you when they need reassurance, validation, distraction, comfort, and when they're done, you're set aside. You don't notice it at first because you're trapped in a comforting illusion that being there for everyone will guarantee someone will be there for you. It doesn't work that way. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, liked, and approved of. And it is this very mask that keeps you overly accessible. You say, "It's fine," while suffocating inside. You reply instantly, even when exhausted. You justify yourself, explain yourself, defend yourself, as if your existence requires permission. But the more you center your life around others' expectations, the more you fade from your own. Constant availability is a quiet form of self-erasure. It's approval-seeking disguised as generosity, fear of rejection disguised as kindness, control over image disguised as selflessness. And the cost is always the same: your peace, your vitality, your inner strength. Your energy is not infinite, no matter how much you pretend it is. The people who demand unlimited access to you don't actually want you. They want what you provide: attention, comfort, presence, emotional labor. When you change, when you hesitate, when you stop reacting, they become irritated. They accuse. They say you've changed. You haven't. You've simply stopped being useful to them. And here is the harshest truth of all: the more available you are, the less valuable you become. What is abundant is not respected. What requires no effort is not cherished. So pause and reflect. Who genuinely deserves your time, your attention, your presence, or more importantly, who deserves your absence? Before you can answer that, there's one essential concept you must understand, and it explains why reacting feels almost automatic. Jung called it psychic energy, and if you don't learn how to protect it, someone else will spend it for you. That's what we'll uncover next. How many nights have you lost replaying a single conversation in your mind? How many hours have you spent analyzing what you should have said, what you meant to say, or why someone treated you the way they did? That isn't reflection, that's leakage. You are spending energy on something that no longer exists. Old conversations become mental ghosts, and every time you revisit them, you revive dynamics that should have ended long ago. You keep situations alive, not because they still matter, but because you keep responding to them internally. This is how psychic energy is drained without resistance. Jung understood energy not as a metaphor, but as a psychological reality. When guarded, it forms an invisible field around you, a presence. People sense it the moment you enter a room. You don't demand respect, you generate it. But when that energy is unmanaged, scattered, and reactive, something else happens. You fade. You become emotionally porous, easily disturbed, easily provoked, easily pulled off center. And the world is not gentle with people who give themselves away freely. This is why the first step is not withdrawal. It is awareness. Begin observing your triggers. What words pull an immediate reaction out of you? What behaviors destabilize you instantly? What situations make you feel compelled to explain, defend, or justify yourself? Those are not random weaknesses. They are exit points. That is where your energy escapes. The work is not to become cold or disconnected. It is to become selective, to reclaim sovereignty over yourself. And here is one of Jung's most unsettling insights. When you stop supplying energy, you interrupt the projections others place upon you. This is where things grow uncomfortable, because when people can no longer project onto you, they become disturbed. We are now stepping into darker psychological territory, the domain of silent manipulation. Most people believe manipulation looks loud. It doesn't. The most effective manipulation is subtle, invisible, and automatic. You think you're choosing your reactions freely. You believe you're responding consciously, but the truth is more unsettling. Most emotional reactions are conditioned responses, and those who understand this don't need to threaten you. They don't need to dominate you. They simply press the exposed buttons, and you react exactly as expected. Jung called this projection the unconscious act of placing disowned parts of oneself onto another person. But here's what few people recognize. When you are emotionally over-available, you don't just receive projections, you become a surface for them, a blank canvas. Think about the patterns. The friend who only contacts you during emotional crises. The partner who relies on you to stabilize chaos. The person who praises you, but only when you are useful. These relationships are not accidental. They are not relating to you. They are relating to the role you've agreed to perform. And why do you keep playing it? Fear. Fear of disappointing. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. The most effective manipulation does not happen through shouting or threats. It happens through guilt. Through the quiet pressure of obligation, through the belief that you owe something, through the illusion that you must always be available, always understanding, even when it corrodes you internally. Here is the core truth. A manipulator does not need to control you. They only need you to keep reacting the same way. But the moment you don't, the moment you say no, remain silent, or withdraw, instead of explaining, the structure collapses. The projections begin to fall apart. The image they placed on you cracks. And this is deeply unsettling. Because now they no longer know who you are. Worse, they are forced to confront themselves. And not everyone is equipped for that. Your unavailability becomes a threat. Not because you did something wrong, but because your silence exposes the noise inside them. When you stop responding, the internal chaos they were avoiding resurfaces, and then comes the backlash, criticism, emotional outbursts, subtle attacks, not because you harmed them, but because you stopped serving as a psychological escape. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw energy, the shadow emerges, not yours, but theirs. And that shadow is unbearable for those who relied on you to avoid it. Now comes the real question. Are you prepared to be misunderstood? To be judged? To be labeled distant, cold, or selfish simply for protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that follows the rupture? Because it is in that silence that something new forms. A different kind of power. And this leads us to the next stage. One that most people never reach. Silence. Not silence as weakness, not silence as fear, but silence as a deliberate psychological force. The modern world is addicted to noise. Everyone wants to respond instantly, to argue, to explain, to win debates that cost them their peace. But there is a form of silence that dismantles power structures completely. A conscious silence, a strategic silence, a silence so controlled that it amplifies presence instead of diminishing it. Jung did not view silence as emptiness, but as fertile ground for transformation. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. Patterns emerge, cycles reveal themselves, manipulation becomes obvious, and lucidity is dangerous, especially to those who thrive on your confusion. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain, when you simply disappear? It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence strips them of narrative control. As long as you speak, you're still playing the game. But when you fall silent, you change the rules. And anyone who depended on your reactions will feel destabilized. That is where we go next. Because once you understand silence, you no longer fear it. And once you no longer fear it, the entire dynamic between you and the world changes. True silence is not muteness. It is command. It is the discipline of holding your energy instead of scattering it in reaction to other people's emotions. It is the decision to refuse battles that drain you but teach you nothing. Silence, when conscious, is not weakness. It is restraint guided by clarity. Jung understood this deeply. He believed that individuation, The process of becoming who you truly are requires distance. Because only when the external noise fades can you finally hear your own voice without distortion. But do not romanticize silence. It comes with a cost. When you grow quieter, you automatically separate from those who only valued your function, not your depth. You become confusing to people who only understood you through the projections they placed on you. To them, you may appear distant, arrogant, cold. But this reaction reveals the truth. They were never interested in knowing you, only in using you. Maturity sharpens selectivity. You stop speaking just to fill space. You stop explaining just to be understood. You stop offering access to everyone because you realize something fundamental. Every word you speak is an energetic investment. And not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Sometimes silence is not withdrawal. It is sovereignty. It is the language of people who no longer need validation, defense, or applause. Silence unsettles others because it forces them inward. Without your responses, they are left alone with their own thoughts, their own noise, their own unresolved tension. That discomfort tells you far more about them than any argument ever could. You don't need to explain your absence. Your absence speaks for itself. And those who feel threatened by it reveal how much they relied on your imbalance to maintain their sense of control. But the deepest power of silence has nothing to do with others. Its real strength is internal. There is a silence that dismantles you, and a silence that rebuilds you. The latter reconnects you to something untouched by approval, expectation, or obligation. In that internal space, free from constant demands, your vital energy begins to return. You remember who you were before you learned to perform. And this is crucial, because it is not enough to cut off noise. You must relearn how to use your energy, where it flows, where it stays, and where it must never go again. Understanding this intellectually means nothing if behavior remains unchanged. If you still say yes when your body says no, if you still respond out of guilt, if you still participate in conversations that leave you depleted, if you still maintain relationships out of habit rather than truth, awareness without action is self-deception in a refined form. Real transformation begins the moment you choose selectivity and commit to it. This requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not cruelty. It is not arrogance. It is not indifference. It is the refusal to be accessible to everyone at all times for every reason. It is reclaiming authority over your time, your energy, your peace, and it begins with small acts. Pausing before responding, leaving discussions before they spiral, turning off your phone without guilt, saying, "Not today," saying, "I won't engage," saying nothing at all. And here is the most difficult truth for many to accept. You do not need to justify your silence. You do not owe explanations for protecting yourself. And for some people, this is unforgivable, because when you stop explaining, you strip them of the power to keep you trapped in an emotional narrative where you are always helpful, always available, always understanding. Jung recognized that individuation inevitably includes isolation, not pathological isolation, not withdrawal born of fear, but sacred isolation. A period of inner retreat where you stop defining yourself through the eyes of others, where you rebuild identity from your own center rather than borrowed approval. Want a clear indicator of growth? Watch who pulls away when you become more reserved. Watch who provokes you when you stop reacting. Watch who accuses you of changing when you finally set boundaries. These are not signs of failure. They are confirmations of liberation. At first, unavailability feels wrong. Guilt surfaces. Doubt creeps in. You question whether you're being selfish. But this discomfort is part of deconditioning. You were trained to put yourself last. Of course, reclaiming yourself feels unnatural. And not only you feel it, Everyone who benefited from your old version feels it too. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what sustains you. When you leave toxic environments, you affirm that peace matters more than false connection. When you stop explaining yourself, respect begins to replace access, even if it comes from fewer people. But understand this: not everyone can tolerate your presence once you withdraw emotionally. Your absence will expose wounds they never wanted to face. It will reveal how much they depended on your chaos to feel stable. And this is where rupture happens. With rupture comes pain, loneliness, a sense of loss. But what you are losing is not yourself. You are losing the version of you that survived by self-betrayal. And then something else emerges. When you stop being available to everyone, the first thing you encounter is silence. An unsettling silence. It echoes. It questions you. It makes you wonder if you went too far. But slowly, that silence changes texture. It cleanses. It steadies. It heals. Then comes solitude. Not emptiness. Presence. Your own presence. The solitude of strength. The solitude of someone who no longer abandons themselves to keep others close. And in that space, clarity replaces confusion. Calm replaces anxiety. Wholeness replaces need. A new strength forms. Not the strength of domination, but the strength of self-containment. And this is what comes next. Because once you understand this solitude, you begin to understand freedom itself. Carl Jung made something very clear. Individuation, becoming who you truly are, demands separation. It requires stepping away from the collective identity, dismantling the mask you've worn to survive, and enduring a period of inner solitude. And that is exactly what happens the moment you choose unavailability. You are not running from life. You are returning to yourself. This is the turning point where you stop reacting to the world and start originating from within. Circumstances no longer define you. You begin to shape your inner reality first, and from there, everything else reorganizes. Those who feel disturbed by your absence expose something important. They were never attached to you. They were attached to the function you served: the listener, the rescuer, the stabilizer, the emotional container. And when you step out of that role, they don't know how to relate to you anymore. That confusion is freedom. Yes, you will lose people, but what you gain is yourself. You will pull away from familiar environments, but in doing so, you reconnect with your essence. You will be misunderstood, but for the first time, you will also be respected, because availability without limits is forgettable. Scarcity creates value. When you are no longer accessible to every demand, every mood, every emotional vacuum, you become distinct, memorable, unreplaceable. And make no mistake, this is not deprivation. This is rebirth. A clean break from a life where you accepted emotional crumbs, tolerated subtle manipulation, and confused intensity with intimacy. From now on, you accept only what aligns with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. Nothing else gets access. If you've followed this message to this point, it's not by accident. A part of you already knows. It knows that being desired means nothing if it requires self-erasure. It knows that love that demands your abandonment is not love. It's dependency. And it knows that real self-respect begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means walking alone for a while. So here's the real question, and don't answer it lightly. Are you prepared to be misunderstood in order to be authentic? Are you willing to be rejected so you can be free? Are you strong enough to be disliked for refusing to betray yourself? If this resonates, anchor it. Write in the comments, "I choose my peace," not for validation, but as a commitment. And stay with me, because what comes next matters more than you realize. See you in the next part.